I love you all. I'm taking this cube thing with me. I don't understand it, but I will.
Like no one understands.
We don't pick the ballroom, we just dance.
Back in the 2000s, editor-in-chief Joe Quesada had a great idea for the struggling Marvel Comics line. Let's rejuvenate it with new characters that embody familiar themes. And thus, the age of derivative characters began. Kate Bishop, Sam Wilson, and Kamala Khan are just the tip of the many characters that were born from this initiative. Some were good, some were great, and most of them were awful. The majority of these characters were editorially mandated. They were created to appeal to specific audiences, to represent them, and to make Marvel appear more diverse. Except one.
Hey fellas.
And today you'll find out how just another Spider-Man became one of the best Spider-Man ever created. Spider-Man Noir is a fantastic concept that, even after Into the Spider-Verse, still has so much to offer. And I really hope this new Amazon Prime show does the character justice. Now, for us to better understand this character, let's explore his origin, but not his comic book origin, his real one. Fabrice Sapolsky, writer, artist, editor, social activist, and whatever else the comic book industry needed him to be, is the creator of Spider-Man Noir. What's interesting is that Fabrice is French, and one of the very few comic writers from that part of the world to break into the American comic book industry. He was born and raised in Paris, and at the age of 6, in 1977, discovered the savage Hyborian world of Conan the Barbarian. He doesn't actually remember the exact issue, but in an interview with Marvel, he said,
my first Marvel-related book was a Conan book. It was a Conan the Barbarian, a giant-sized Conan the Barbarian. I must have been 7.
And after doing some detective work, I figured out that he was referring to issue 78 of Conan the Barbarian. Great issue, by the way. He loved comics and wanted to work in the industry, but because of his French nationality and the lack of opportunities to break into the US market, he instead pursued a career in journalism. Now, getting into comics, it's a lot easier than it used to be, at least in the independent scene. Back in the 17th, 18th, and 19th, the comics artists and writers were mostly American and Canadian. In 1998, at the age of 27, Fabrice realized there was no European equivalent to Wizard magazine, a publication dedicated entirely to comic book readers. After doing some research, he discovered that Europe actually had a massive comic book fan base, mostly thanks to Marvel UK, Belgian publishers, and magazines like Heavy Metal and 2000 AD. So he decided that if such a magazine was going to exist, it should be made by him. And thus, comicbooks was born. Comicbooks became a low-key hit in the comic book world. It lasted 19 years, published over 100 issues, and even got 2 separate revivals. Why revivals? Because in the comic book world, nobody dies. Of course! I read some issues myself, and there are some really good interviews with European artists, articles about American comics, and most importantly, a heavy emphasis on creator-owned and independent work. Truth be told, it's not for everyone. If you are a comic book historian, know some French, and want to expand your knowledge, check it out. In 2006, Fabrice went to London for a few days, one of his typical conventions meetups with other editors. One morning, while shaving, he was struck by a great idea. What if Spider-Man was a detective? A limited comic series written by him, out of continuity, featuring a different Peter Parker with a more European flavor, fighting criminals while also reflecting some of his political beliefs. But how do you make it happen? Well, since he was already in London, he reached out to one of his old Marvel UK connections, David Hine. Who is David Hine? He's a not so prolific English writer who worked extensively for Marvel and several smaller publishers, writing titles such as Silent War, Strange Embrace, X-Men, What If, and The Bulletproof Coffin. He became known as one of the go-to writers for side stories connected to major Marvel events during the 2000s. Fabrice flew back to France, but a few days later he received a phone call. It was David Hine. He wanted to talk more about the idea, but in person. So Fabrice flew back to London and the two began developing the character and the story. Eventually they decided that the 1930s New York was the perfect sandbox for this version of Spider-Man. The story was ready. Now came the difficult part. How do you convince Marvel Comics to actually publish it? On his last day in London, Fabrice was preparing to leave for France when he received a call. It's David Hine. Again! What a shock! He tells him that Jim McCann, Marvel's marketing director, was having lunch the next day with editor-in-chief Joe Quesada, and they had only a very small window to pitch the idea. So, through hard work and a little bit of luck, the two presented the Spider-Man noir concept to Joe Quesada. They talked for a while, and the next week, Fabrice received an email. It's from Joe. He loves the idea and tells him, "Welcome to Marvel Comics." Finally, after years of being a Marvel fan, years of believing he wasn't good enough, that his nationality will hold him up, and that comics were an unforgiving industry, Fabrice finally had proof that none of this was actually true. But before we dive into the comic, proper modifications must be made. Much better. The only problem now is I wanted to solve this Rubik's Cube like Spider-Man Noir, but I can't do it anymore, because I can't see the colors. Now, if somebody could help me with that, maybe you can, by, I don't know, leaving a comment below, see what happens. Now, the story. Here we have a young Peter Parker who isn't a private detective, but a hot-headed young man who really wants to change the system. He wants to save the people of New York from the wealthy elite, rally the working class together, and give ordinary people a voice against corruption. And he does this alongside Aunt May, who in this universe is the leader of a political activist movement. This version of Peter is deeply ideological. He strongly believes in justice, equality, and standing up for the oppressed. Peter is a socialist, a leftist, a Marxist, or even better said in the comic, a proletarian. Eventually, he meets journalist Ben Urich. Urich takes a liking to Peter and hires him as his photographer. The deal is, Peter photographs the crimes and injustices committed by Norman Osborn, known here as the Goblin, while Urich publishes the stories in the Daily Bugle. At first, Peter feels fulfilled. He believes he's fighting alongside a man who represents real integrity. But as history constantly proves, reality is rarely that simple. Peter eventually discovers that Ben Urich is secretly taking money from Osborn to support his heroin addiction. Politicians, police officers, journalists, almost everyone in power is compromised in one way or another. Even J. Jonah Jameson, the loud and honest newspaper editor, is ultimately trapped under Osborn's control. And when Ben Urich finally tries to expose the truth about Osborn, he's killed for it by none other than JJJ. That's when Peter truly understands how corruption works. People with power exploit people who have something to lose. After confronting this brutal reality, and after being bitten by a mysterious spider connected to a strange deity, it happens, Peter makes a choice. He refuses to give up. He refuses to back down. And even if his ideals can never fully be achieved, he still chooses to fight for something better. With the deaths of Uncle Ben Urich and everyone else who tried to stand against Osborn, Peter realizes he can no longer survive as just a man. He needs to become something else, a symbol, a persona with nothing left to lose. He needs to become Spider-Man.
My name is Peter Parker. In my universe, it's 1933, and I'm a private eye. I like to drink egg creams, and I like to fight Nazis. A lot. Sometimes I let matches burn down to my fingertips just to feel something, anything.
And so he creates the costume using parts of Uncle Ben's old World War I pilot outfit, combining the goggles and black fabric into, in honesty, a fantastic design. Peter Parker has a lot to lose. Spider-Man does not. Of course, Spider-Man eventually defeats Osborn, but I intentionally left out some twists and turns. If you decide to read the story by yourself, I want you to experience these moments fresh. The noir line became successful enough that Marvel launched additional titles like X-Men, Daredevil, Luke Cage, and Iron Man, all under the noir label. But unfortunately, none of them reached the same level of popularity as Spider-Man. Marvel realized that and later released another miniseries called Spider-Man Eyes Without a Face, with the exact same creative team. But by that point, the main Spider-Man line had become so dominant again that the noir books slowly faded away. From that point on, Fabrice and David eventually handed the character over to Marvel, remaining grateful for the opportunity, while also feeling that much more could have been done with Spider-Man Noir. Fabrice continued supporting comic creators, launched his own independent comic book publishing projects, and kept doing what he always wanted to do: create comics without heavy editorial mandates while helping smaller creators find opportunities. The story is great, but it does suffer from pacing issues. Everything moves very quickly and some major events happen so fast that you don't have the time to breathe in those events. So what I'm trying to say is that it's not a perfect comic, but it's a damn good one. And one of the best parts, it offers a fresh interpretation of Spider-Man. I think I might prefer this version over the movie adaptation. Simply put, this Spider-Man feels more complex, more grounded. With this video, I tried to promote the story of Fabrice Sapolsky, talk about the origin of Spider-Man Noir and said comic book, and explain the differences between the original comic book and the newer versions. If you think I did a good, competent, great, awful job, please let me know in the comments below. I'll see you next time. Much love. Bye.